It's part 4 of the India Abridged campaign in Hearts of Iron 4, where last time my plan to conquer the United Kingdom almost happened. We somehow got some territory in Poland, but then because of various game restrictions, we were not able to use that to invade the UK. I tried to fight the Axis to gain some territory I could use, got absolutely annihilated, and now we're back at it again with another run at the same campaign with a few differences. This time we are a democracy and we're not in the Allies, but we're going to be aligned to the Allies. I want to get involved in World War II as soon as possible, bring down the German Reich and try to get some of their northwestern territories so that I can then start World War III against the Allies, somehow using that territory. Now, as for the world situation, it's all a bit messy. World War II didn't happen for a while, but there are various other wars going on. But the war has just started. The way that I'm involved in this war is because I popped guarantees of independence on Belgium and Luxembourg, thinking that will surely get me involved in the war pretty much when it starts. It didn't start for a while, but here we are in 1941. Belgium is being invaded. We're in the war, and now, well, we're not in the Allies are going to like me for helping them with this, so we can grab military access with all of them. But most notably, I'm not going to join the Allies, even though I can, as part of my long-term plan to eventually betray them in some way. I thought I'll stay out of the Allies for this war. So here we are, in Belgium. My troops managed to make it here somehow, before Belgium really got taken down, despite the long journey. So Belgium must have put up a decent enough fight at the start of the war. The Netherlands, by the way, is in the Axis, so they were helping Germany here as well. Now, of course, it's simply a supplies game. The military tactics don't matter, we just need to somehow keep our divisions in supply, and that's going to be the rest of this campaign effectively. We need to upgrade our ports and infrastructure at home to improve our supply lines to overseas locations, and in some cases we just need to not deploy troops, unfortunately. At least this deployment goes pretty well. The Germans are hammering us, trying to attack through Belgium all the time at several points, constant battles all over the place, but we're winning them all and cancelling the battles each time, so we have halted the enemy's advance, and slowly but surely we're going to see French and British troops come down to join the line. So we're essentially just delaying things for long enough for the Allies to get their act together and to defend their territory themselves. And we're doing that quite well with all of these constant victories. We can even make a couple of cheeky pushes forward to grab some of their territory, like that airfield just in front of our front line would probably be good. We don't have any planes and we can't use Allied airfields because we're not in the Allies. But we're helping our allies, probably, if the AI chooses to use that. I actually brought over even more troops, but we very much ended up in a constant out of supply situation that's only going to get worse because, famously, as ranted about in my previous Hearts of Iron campaigns, the AI does not take the supply system into account, meaning if we lock down this area with loads of troops, the AI will also do that. They'll just put the same amount of troops, massive overkill, everyone eats up all the supplies, and it just all goes wrong, causing you to become less and less strong the more troops you put at a location. So to slightly remedy that, I'm going to have my smaller army here not participate in the fighting and just sort of hang out towards the back in a different supply region, thinking maybe we'll find a use for them later. For some reason it took me a long time to get them to leave the front line. I'm still slightly bamboozled by the game when sometimes units won't accept orders or something. Anyway, we've got some action because the Confederated States of America are invading the Netherlands by sea. Now that's a big naval invasion. I guess these guys have some actual ships. Unfortunately, they're super fascist, so it's a little bit hit and miss whether they're actually going to be on our side here. But that might help us out because we want to eventually break the Allies up. So having one of the major Allied powers be very ideologically aligned against the Allies could work to our advantage, but for now it's also going to work to our advantage in the war with the Allies because they're going to open up this other front. I can deploy some troops here and be in a different supply region and now push towards the back side of our original front. So with this we're going to be able to bring the Netherlands out of the war pretty fast and make sure this World War II scenario is relatively contained. We just have to invade Germany, try and capitulate them, and then work towards my peace deal where I get northwestern Germany. It sounds easy enough, but it's going to take an extremely long time, let me tell you, as we'll be getting into in this series. There's also a bit of other drama to contend with. Afghanistan is super fascist right now, and they have joined the Axis, which means there's now a threat of India itself actually being invaded through World War II shenanigans. I decided to deploy this reserve army that was standing around to the border, and sure enough, before they even got there, Afghanistan did declare war and start invading, so we're going to arrive just a little bit too late, but we'll be in time to generally contain this situation and not lose too much of Pakistan in the process. Good timing. We also should be able to push them back because Afghanistan don't have that much stuff, and we can probably recruit new stuff faster than they can. So in a war of attrition, that will look good. The Western Front has now formed where everybody's just standing around. We're all going to run out of supplies, the AI will forget how to attack. This is going to be a stalemate, and stalemate's going to be the name of the game with any big Hearts of Iron 4 conflict. We have to step into the stalemate and force something to happen where we can. The main way I like to achieve this is by occasionally box selecting a bunch of random divisions and telling them to attack into the enemy. Some of them might find some success, as we see here, and in other cases we tell them to immediately stop their attacks when it's going to go badly. I'm trying to cut off this tiny pocket here. We can just about do it to kill a couple of enemy divisions, nothing too significant. But we're certainly getting there with the Netherlands. They're going downtown. As for the battles themselves, well, who even knows what's happening at this stage? I've already made a video at some point on the mysterious number system of Hearts of Iron combat. The way it simulates the battles is both extremely complicated and poorly communicated to the player. So ultimately, no matter what it says, you can't really rely on knowing what the outcome's going to be. But here's a good situation we end up in. Absolutely piling on a bunch of enemy divisions from all directions after we've cut off their supply lines as well. They're getting some stat debuffs due to encirclement, bothering to actually look at the numbers there, but as I said, doesn't really mean too much. It's going well though. Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, it's also going well. We have a few more divisions than they do, so we can make use of the space and move into empty tiles, things like that. Plus, our divisions appear to be a tiny bit better. Maybe the enemy don't have artillery or something, I didn't check, but we were seemingly able to just run into them and pile drive through them. So with that, we come to this situation. I did actually end up getting a bunch of my guys surrounded in the enemy capital, but it doesn't matter because while attempting to rescue them, Afghanistan surrenders and we get all their territory apart from one little spot. So that's nice. We might even get to keep Afghanistan after the war. We now border the Soviets, who we're de facto allied with in that we're both at war with Germany, so don't have to worry too much about that. And all of these troops here are freed up. I'm going to send one of the two armies I've got fighting in Afghanistan back to Europe. It was one that was in Europe before. Meanwhile, in Europe, just doing the usual thing, looking for random spots we can attack, and especially trying to grab things like airfields and cities, which are a bit more important to take. Well, I don't know. The main point to take home is that the AI doesn't really attack, so it is us very slowly advancing the front line by constantly going after weak-looking tiles. The AI is just kind of filling in the front line and making sure we can't make any back progress. While that's happening, it's time to think about getting some tanks onto the field. We're finally in a good enough place economically that we're not struggling to keep up with the production of infantry equipment quite so much. So I felt willing to dedicate some military factories to making tanks, and for that we'll need to deploy an armoured division. We've got this nice big 40 width division in the works. It's going to have loads of tanks in it. It will be hard to manufacture them to make it, but once it exists, it should be quite strong. Here's our new front opened up with the troops that have arrived from Afghanistan going into southwestern Germany. Again, it's just going to be a massive micro battle there, searching out weak tiles to attack and very slowly moving forwards. It's kind of annoying, it's a lot of micro, but for whatever reason, I quite like doing this one tile advanced micro where you're constantly scrambling to find tiny little weak points. It's something like putting a puzzle together. As it comes together piece by piece, it feels like you're constantly making progress as you look for those opportunities and make those small decisions. So while it technically sucks on paper, I kind of like doing it, although there's nothing to say about it, so we're going to be skipping through most of that process in this series. We are able to get a quite good strategic move as the guys in the southwest link up with the guys in the northwest. partially cutting off the German front line. We'll strand a load of divisions to the west once we're done cutting them off, and they'll be stuck there, which leads to this situation now where we've got this pocket with 10 plus divisions and we can just wail on them from all directions to delete those divisions. All good stuff. We're certainly helping, not seeing any of the other allied factions doing anything in this war. It appears to be all me so far, which is the experience I remember having. A bit of a bother, really, because I would like this war to be over quickly. I think we certainly have the numbers to beat Germany. We're just not doing it. They're waiting for me to do it, and I personally don't quite have those numbers. Really dragging this war out. We were able to cut off the top bit of Germany near Denmark, and then conquer that. That's a few more divisions who will be deleted and some territory taken. Just moving towards capitulation, need to take some amount of Germany before they give up, at least in terms of our war with Germany, but we'll come back to that in a second. A while later, I've done another wild push that will allow me to nip off another bit of the German front line and surround a bunch of divisions by just winning this simple battle with an attack from two sides. All very good, and as you can see, both our AI, the Allied AI, and the enemy AI aren't doing anything. They're not counterattacking, they're not moving to defend against these moves, so it's kind of strange. We're just gradually killing them. We do just about have the numbers to win most of our attacks. So, we keep making attacks, and here we are attacking the now surrounded pocket we created. We just attack them down to one tile, then attack that. All of the divisions will disappear. Very nice, another big contribution to the war. Now we need to find a new frontline position. We can't see most of the front line because we're not in the Allies. We don't get their intel, but we can presume they have armies right there. We'll just keep going, constantly spamming these offensive plans that I'm not using, just to make our planning bonus go up to get the extra attacking stat, a nice sort of possible exploit where you can plan an attack, make a different attack, and the plan still counts for it. Whatever. In the top right hand corner, we're seeing the first signs that things are going to be a bit harder than I thought. Because while we're doing fine advancing along the Soviet border where there are lots of easy chances to attack, you might notice the Allies and the Soviets are occasionally fighting each other here. So there's actually another aspect to this war. This has happened before in this game, I seem to remember, discovering that secretly the Allies were at war with the Comintern as well all along. So we've got a triple World War II, where it's Allies versus Axis versus Comintern versus Allies, and we're neutral, trying to just fight the Axis and hope that our parents get along, but they won't. I'm checking out the wars here because I wanted to see how the USSR is at war with the Allies, because it didn't appear that they should be, and going through these lists, I still couldn't find it. It appears to be a generally Comintern and Allies versus Axis war, all three of them going on here. This third part, it's just us versus the Axis, so that's the war for Belgian independence that we separately created. And we're just sort of a separate party to the other wars because it happens to involve the same countries. Somewhere in there that I couldn't find, there's a reason for the Allies to be attacking the Comintern as well. That's an issue because the Allies are now going to be distracted, the Comintern are going to be distracted. That's all strength that's not applied against the Axis, meaning it's even more the case that I'm going to have to do everything myself, of course. My next major move was to cut this path south that would then separate the corner of Germany, which will now be ours for the taking, out of supply, not enough troops in there to defend this amount of space, so a bunch of free territory to capture, then a bunch of easy battles against surrounded demoralized troops stuck in these last pockets. The French forces nearby actually slightly helped here, although only mainly by occupying empty territory. They didn't really attack the enemy, that was still mostly us. Hopefully it's all contributing to our war contribution score that you get at the end, which I presume affects how much stuff you can demand at peace treaties, and while we don't have that much to demand, that might be useful later. Now, at a random moment as we push further into Germany, bang, the Reich capitulates, we get some free stuff off them, which is always useful, but this isn't going to lead to the good situation I was looking for, generally speaking. So there was no peace conference there. The war is still going, or a war is still going, but our official war against Germany over Belgium has been won. The reward for us seems to be that we now have what remains of the Reich, but that's of no use to us whatsoever. We needed a certain part of the Reich, the top left, and we're not going to get a chance to ask for that, I presume, until the Reichs of the wars are settled. We need the Allies to stop the war, or the Comintern to stop the war, but because they're at war with a faction, this essentially means we need to defeat like Japan as well to make the peace conference happen. But because the Allies and the Comintern are fighting each other, they're going to be at war right here, pretty much along the line of our new territory, and that's going to make them much less likely to bother teaming up and defeating Japan. So, an endless war in all directions across the entire planet is about to begin, massively delaying that peace treaty that I need to continue my personal mission. While that stews away in the background, I could chill and do a few other things. I've grabbed there the Will of the People national character. This means that support for communism will gradually grow in the background, because now our goal is to be less democratic. We want to go either communist or fascist. Going for communist here because it will allow us to link up with the Comintern and have that as our faction in World War III for our push against the United Kingdom. The other possible option, as mentioned earlier, is that if the USA leaves the Allies, we could go fascist and team up with them. As it stands though, they're in the Allies, so that's no good to us. I think it would be possible for us to go fascist using those national character things, at least very slowly. In the meantime, we've got some decisions to make, and you can see what I was considering doing is just attacking the Allies, just siding with the Comintern now, and then pushing west to go and get the territory I need, because that way we don't have to wait for World War III. We can occupy the United Kingdom as part of World War II by just switching sides in the middle of it. The thing about that was, I immediately backed down, as you can already see. Instead, I'm going to take my troops home to India and just sit around sulking for a bit, plus generally refitting the army with new equipment gradually coming through the production lines, and new units as well, very slowly being spat out, slowed down by lack of production. The tank divisions will be here soon. There's another big production related move we can make now that we're just sitting around. We can open up our division designer and make our divisions bigger. We have plenty of spare manpower, and we now have at least some spare equipment, so I thought, let's just quickly throw all that into the armies by doubling the size of our divisions. People on the internet do say that it's better to have your divisions like this, so instead of a 20 width 7x2 division, we have the 40 width 14x4 division, meaning 14 infantry, 4 artillery, and a bunch of support stuff. That means we now have to let our divisions refill with new troops that will gradually filter in, and they'll grab a bunch of new equipment as well. We run out of infantry equipment immediately. We're now 2 years behind on production. It'll take us 2 years to get all of the guns we need to double our army size. So that's something to wait for. And the Bengal Famine is happening again. This time I decided to go with asking the Americans, since I hadn't tried that before. Stalin was usually a good choice, and America turns out to be a pretty bad choice because they just don't do anything. As a result, we can't ask anyone else. We just have to take the famine, which comes with massive debuffs on top of some already massive debuffs we had from our agrarian economy, which we'll see here in the national spirit list. The one upside is that the shaking in faith of the government has increased the popularity of communism, my target ideology. That's something, but is that worth losing tons of production, most of our recruitable population, more than half of it, and a bunch of other stuff? Well, probably not. We can do this decision that will make it less bad. However, it will also increase support for democracy if you start trying to solve the famine. And in a ruthless accelerationist sort of way, I was like, well, I don't really want to increase government support because I want a regime change, so maybe I shouldn't try sorting out the famine. In the end, I was too soft-hearted. I decided I would sort out the famine, especially because it's going to make getting our army back on track easier by adding more production and recruits to our pools. That's that then. I did have something to do while I was sitting around, because we are still at war with the Axis, and while the Axis is mainly outside of our reach, I could make some attacks. We can fight here in Vietnam against the Guangxi clique. I left an army in Europe in case I needed to do something with it. They're in training right now because doubling the army size halves the army's experience because all of the new recruits don't know what they're doing. So they all have to go back into training for a while. This army is already prepared for that. We've gone through the training with this smaller group. So we can fight here and try to push the front line forwards in Vietnam. There's not much we can do, broadly speaking, though, because we're not going to be able to attack Japan anytime soon. I did also have a project to stop Japan from conquering Mongolia, which you can see is currently ongoing. That would help out against the Axis, but there are no supplies up here, and it's really hard to move around, meaning our forces are going to have very limited capabilities and we don't achieve very much. While that was happening, I did some more research and I eventually worked out the entire global geopolitics situation is revolving around some area in Finland. The Soviet Union is pressing a claim to a region in Finland, and I'm pretty sure that's why the Allies and the Soviets are attacking each other. They're just trying to resolve that dispute. This means, I think, that if we capitulated the Soviet Union, they wouldn't lose any territory, it would just give Finland back their territory. And then we could all bring down the Axis. And with that thought in mind, I started to commit to something like this, forming my front line along the Soviet border. This is where we're going to be heading in the next part. We are going to help the Allies bring down the Soviets, the guys that I want to ally with, in order to stop them from fighting so that we can all defeat the Axis. I'll get to go to a peace conference and steal half of the Reich. Somehow we'll become communist along the way, link up with the USSR, and then push all the way back over to the left to take the United Kingdom. There's still some semblance of a reverse Raj plan here, but it seems to be constantly getting further and further into the future.